Applying to 2 top MBA programs and ultimately getting accepted to both was a time-consuming and a really grueling experience. Honestly, I didn't think that I stood the chance to get into either of them. I ended up applying to 2 schools, University of California, Berkeley, Haas, and Northwestern Kellogg. In the end, I decided to go with Kellogg, but I wanted to give you a little bit of insight into my application experience and really kind of like what it took from my perspective. I wanted to make this video to help out anybody else who's looking to apply to MBA school or also just generally considering it. I think that getting different perspectives, this one included, is something that might help you out. So with that said, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them down below in the comments and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about my work experience, my application process, and then finally the interview process. I've been working since 2015, and I think my work experience was definitely one part of my application that helped me to set me apart from other people. I've been working in tech generally, specifically in marketing, and I was able to go from a couple of startups to pretty big companies like Amazon. And through all of that process, I learned a lot along the way. And honestly, work experience is one of the biggest things that business schools are looking for because you can be able to draw that experience and bring it to the classroom. What business schools are looking for is for you to be able to really use that in the classroom setting and help other students. So before applying to business school, I had about 7 years of work experience under my belt. I started working in 2015. And have gradually kind of worked my way up throughout different positions, but generally I work in tech and in marketing. With that said, work experience is something that business schools are really looking for. And in fact, in a lot of cases, they require that you have at least 3 to 5 years of work experience before even considering to apply, especially as you think about executive type level MBA programs. And the reason is they want to be able to have people from different backgrounds and from all walks of life be able to come and bring that experience into the classroom. So business schools really value that. For me, I had waited quite a long time actually in my career, what kind of felt like a long time before deciding to apply to business school because of this very fact. I thought it could really be an advantage for me when I was applying to be able to draw from these experiences in my applications. When I decided to apply, I was at a point where I felt I had definitely grown in my career, but I still had room to grow. As I'll get into a little bit later, I think that the work experience I was able to draw on, it really helped when it came time to my essays as well as my interviews. All right, so moving on to number 2, applications and tests are obviously a big part of the MBA journey, and it's no doubt a check the box, but at the same time, it shouldn't rule you out from other aspects of your application, like your essays and your interviews. So I actually ended up taking the GRE 3 times. Yeah, it's a little bit embarrassing, but I first took the GRE in 2016. Pretty much like my first year out of college, I had a bit of a gap in my career where I had some downtime and, I figured, okay, let me try this, but I didn't really put a lot of effort into it. And back then I honestly I wasn't great in terms of time management, etc. So, I took it then, didn't do super well. And then a few years later, I said, okay, I got to give this a go again if eventually I want to go to business school, and my scores were starting to expire. So I took it again and I did okay. I did a bit better, right? But there was still definitely a lot of room to improve. And then the third time around, I was like, okay, I really got to just like commit myself to this. And my math score improved a lot. Ironically enough, my writing score actually went down. I didn't really focus on the writing portion at all. And this is an important point. Business schools in general, they want to see pretty decent math scores, but the writing scores, they don't really matter as much. So in terms of prioritizing your energy, whether you're taking the GRE or the GMAT, I would say go for the math section. Essays are another huge part of your application journey, and it's a way for the folks at these schools to get to know you, to get to know really what you care about and why you want to attend business school. So in my situation, I had, I think 2 to 3 people reviewing 2 to 3 different essays for both Berkeley and Kellogg. And the good news is there's some level of crossover in terms of the content, but at the same time, you need to cater what you're saying in your essays to each school's, specifically the values of each school. So Kellogg and Berkeley, they both list out leadership principles on their websites. And these leadership principles are really, really important to the school administrators. And to be honest, even the students themselves, everybody that I've spoken to, all the alums, they are actively thinking about these principles as they're going through their MBA journey. And so the schools are looking for, are you as a candidate, are you doing the research to know, first of all, what these leadership principles are? Have you thought about them in terms of the context of your career and how you might be able to participate? And then bundling that all up, synthesizing all of that information, that's a challenge in and of itself, but that's what the schools want to see. So I'll go through a couple examples of the essays and what I ended up writing about. And this could just be helpful for serving as kind of inspiration if you're kind of at the process of thinking about what I want to write in terms of topics. There's no right or wrong answer, obviously, but again, this is kind of how I thought about it and went about it, so hopefully it's helpful to you. So across both the schools, they were looking for examples of leadership, sort of in the form of the question, what is a time at work or in your work experience or in your volunteer experience where you had to take a leadership position, where you had to step up to the plate? So the case that I used was, and again, drawing from my work experience, there were specific scenarios at work that I could say things were just not going well. And this is totally true. Things were not going well, whether we were trying to bring on a new agency for a project or a project was starting to go sideways. And I had to really step up to the plate and just say, okay, how do we take this back to basics? What are we trying to solve? And go from there and kind of illustrate to anybody reading the essay in really clear terms, because there's obviously a word limit, and this is another hard part, is managing the word limit. What is it that you did to really overcome this challenge and to bring about success ultimately to the project or initiative or whatever it was? A second type of very common question that you'll see across all the business schools in general are, what are your short-term goals as well as your long-term goals? And generally short-term goals, at least in the administrators' minds, the people reading your essays, it's about 6 to 12 months. And then longer term is more like 5, maybe 10 years out. Obviously, nobody really knows for sure where they're going to be in 5 years, let alone even 6 months. But what they want to see is that you've thought through it, that you have some general direction, maybe some general sense. Even if it's not what you end up actually doing in business school, it's that you've gone through the process, you're actively thinking about it, you're actually reflecting, and you're a self-aware person, not that you're just throwing something out of thin air, right? And it should also be able to connect back to your experience and the things that you care about. And then finally, the last question that was common in both of the Berkeley and Kellogg applications was, share a little bit about yourself, give a little bit of insight into who you are as a person. And so I decided to have a little bit of fun with these essays. And I think that's also what the schools want you to do. They want to see who you are beyond just the test scores and, you know, the work experience, which obviously is all in your resume. I decided to write about my journey in doing handstands and specifically, you know, kind of frame it in the context of, it's a problem I'm trying to solve for myself. So for example, I talked about how I had to learn the steps of kicking up on the wall and then eventually walking up the wall and then eventually connecting that to actually doing a handstand and being able to just show that, hey, there's things in my life that I try to really kind of think in the same way as I might at work or in a business problem. You know, showing that I actually have stuff that I care about outside of work. That's kind of the essence of the question. When it comes to the interviews, there's really nothing to worry about. And practice, 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 and preparation are going to be your best friends. You should expect to be getting questions like, why do you want to go and get your MBA? Why do you want to be here, right? What are the leadership principles that you care about? These are questions that are no doubt going to be asked, and you should 100% be prepared. I spent a lot of time almost in some ways memorizing a monologue, right? If I knew I was going to get the question, what was it that I wanted to articulate and how did I want to make my point really clear? So obviously summarizing everything in a monologue takes a lot of time, That's what I did. You don't have to go to that level of extreme, but at least being prepared helps you to think on the spot and not get caught up in the thousands of thoughts you might have at the time, or even get over the nerves. One kind of distinct thing about the Berkeley versus the Kellogg interview portion was Berkeley's was actually me just talking to a camera, kind of like this, and answering some questions. And then the Kellogg one was actually with a person that was asking me questions, and we can go back and forth. I think I was lucky that I have some experience doing YouTube, and so it wasn't completely daunting for me to do the Berkeley portion, even though I was just talking to a camera, kind of like I am now. At least I still had my points thought through. I knew what I was trying to say, and I just kind of like executed almost like a monologue. My preference was definitely the Kellogg interview, where I could speak to somebody and just kind of elaborate and go back and forth with them. And they could say, hey, well, you know, you're interested in XYZ, entrepreneurship, etc. Like, these are cool resources that you should really tap into and check out. Some of them I knew, some of them I didn't. So that's always just better, I think, is when you can just talk to somebody. But I understand that with the volume of applications coming in, there needs to be some kind of process as well. I can understand why Berkeley decided to go down that route too. Another question you should anticipate during the interview process is, what are the ways that you're going to contribute to the classroom? For me, I talked in pretty good detail about the clubs I join and communities I'd want to be a part of, and how, even in some cases, even though, you know, it was really just a best guess, how my experience could help to contribute and kind of push the ball forward. And I think that resonated pretty well. All in all, I'm definitely really fortunate and very grateful that I got accepted to both schools. And in the end, like I said, I chose Kellogg. I will say that the application process, answering these questions, being forced to think critically about my career and who I am and my values, it's a great self-reflection exercise in general. And so if you're on the fence about applying to business school, the process itself will force you to come up with reasons and think through really deeply why you want to be here. For everybody, it's a unique and personal journey. And in the end, also, if you get accepted into schools, choosing the schools is also a very personal decision too, but there's no wrong decision in the end. It's just what you want to do. All right, that's a wrap, guys. Thanks so much for sticking around to the end of the video. If you are interested in watching some other MBA related content that we have on RoundUpSave, I will link them right here. Take a look, and until next time, take care.